Welcome back to Transcriber from Reddit. Today's topic comes again from the website Current Revolt. And again, this deals with the ongoing drama of Steven Crowder's divorce. However, this time the article is about Gerald Morgan. The title of the article is Church Disavows Louder with Crowder CEO over Crowder's Extramarital Relationships. The tagline underneath it reads, Church leadership calls Gerald Morgan a, quote, member in name only, end quote. This was written and posted back in August 31st of this year. Now, there's two reasons why I'm covering this. One of which, as I said before, it's about the ongoing drama that Steven Crowder is dragging us all through as he's going through the process of divorcing his wife. The second is, I recognize the name of the pastor. Below the title and tagline, we see a photo. The photo shows Gerald Morgan, I would say roughly middle-aged white male with unshaven stubble on his face and graying brown hair. Got a little bit of a white streak going just on the upper left side of his forehead. And of course, he's got glasses. On the right in the same photograph is Pastor Charles, also known as Chuck Swindoll. Here, Chuck Swindoll is an elderly white male with graying white hair. The lower half of his face is sagging almost to the ground. And he's dressed as he is speaking, I'm assuming, to a congregation of sorts. But my, that is a beautiful dark blue/purple suit he's got on with a matching tie. Below the picture is the caption, Pictured, Louder with Crowder CEO Gerald Morgan and Senior Stonebriar Community Church Pastor Charles Swindoll. All right. Raise your hand if you have ever, or, comment in the video after you're done watching this or while you're watching this, if you've ever listened to Christian radio. And if while listening to Christian radio, growing up, the program of choice was, the radio station of choice, rather, was WRVM, Wisconsin Radio Voice of the Master. But I bring it up because WRVM would it would be a common reoccurring theme that they would feature small bits of lessons from and also some of Pastor Charles. In this case, they refer to him as Pastor Chuck Swindoll. But they would feature some of his sermons and some of his little Bible devotions on the radio. Anyway, I thought that was interesting to point out. Does anybody have any experience being pastored by him? I would be really interested in knowing that. My assumption, having heard him speak before, he sounds like just any other aging white male pastor who has opinions that you'd rather not know, especially if you are a woman. But I digress. I will continue to the body of the article. In italics, it reads, the following is an op-ed via Kenneth Hawkes, end italics. CEO Gerald Morgan is viewed as louder with Crowder's authority on theological issues because of his time at seminary and past work at churches. In fact, he's recently been rewarded with his own series titled, quote, Gerald apologizes apologetics, end quote. Also link there, where he discusses issues of Christian faith and theology. Gerald's saintly demeanor, however, has become strained in recent months as he's called upon to defend Steven Crowder's increasingly questionable allegations, including, and this is the following are linked, berating his pregnant wife, exposing himself at work, sending photos of his genitals to staff, and most recently, admittedly dating other women while married to his wife. End links. In response to more recent allegations, Morgan's own church denounced him as a, quote, "mino," end quote, member in name only. After Current Revolt reported on allegations of infidelity leaking on the dark web, that is linked, Steven Crowder confirmed, and this is in all bold, and also linked, he dated several women while still legally married to his wife, end bold, end link. He explained these, quote, were not one-night stands, end quote, but, quote, meaningful relationships, end quote. Side note, yes, you totally had one-night stands. You just don't want to admit it because that's going to make your already awful your awful public view of yourself look even worse. And continue reading. He also emphasized these relationships took place after the separation and divorce were underway, which he claimed is, quote, 2 years depending on how you calculate it, end quote. Parentheses. Note that it has not yet been 2 years since, this is linked, Hillary filed for divorce, end link, end parentheses. Side note, I could see Crowder having this stance because he was the one who was going to initiate divorce on Hillary Crowder until she found out that he was going to initiate divorce against her. So maybe it's 2 years for him since he thought about divorcing her. I'm just going to leave that there. Think about that. I continue reading. In response to those saying one shouldn't date until actually divorced, Crowder replied, quote, I understand that some people have that point of view. I do not, end quote. As the biblical authority in the room, CEO Gerald Morgan defended Stephen's claim that these relationships did not constitute adultery. In support, Morgan related the story of one of his friends who had been going through a divorce for 8 years. His reasoning seemed to be that because divorce can take a long time, a Christian may sleep with whomever he wants while still legally married. Morgan and Crowder ended the segment by announcing a, quote, win a date with Steven Crowder, end quote, contest, and asking women to send their resumes to datesteven@louderwithcrowder.com, and said that though they should not send, quote, pornography, end quote, but that, quote, tasteful erotica, end quote, would be acceptable. Below that is a screenshot of the aforementioned win a date, exclamation mark, with Steven Crowder, showing Steven Crowder and a beautiful young blonde girl being held in his arms, looking at him adoringly. He is dressed in a black shirt. The young lady in question is dressed in what appears to be the top part of a German Bavarian costume, would be my guess. And on the right is Gerald Morgan with studio headphones on, looking at the two of them. Now, Gerald, no peeking. And of course, at the bottom of the image are the words, date Steven at louderwithcrowder.com. Below the image says source, Louder with Crowder, YouTube. As many on Twitter were quick to point out, Crowder's, quote, denial, end quote, of infidelity was, in fact, a confirmation, at least according to Christian standards, parentheses, both evangelical Protestant and Catholic, end parentheses, as well as Texas law, which defines adultery as, quote, voluntary sexual intercourse of a married person with one not the spouse, end quote. Brandon Smith, editor at Westminster Magazine, tweeted, quote, Crowder is now unashamedly sleeping around with God-fearing women. But it's okay, it's not adultery, because his divorce isn't final and they were meaningful relationships, the absolute state of Christian conservatism, end quote. Crowder's current position also seems at odds with his past views on the subject. He got his start at Fox, writing multiple columns on how men should abstain from fornication, and debated the topic with fellow unfunny comedian Amy Schumer. For comment, I reached out to Stonebriar Community Church, a Texas megachurch founded by senior pastor Chuck Swindoll, where Gerald Morgan is a member. In response to the question, quote, "What is your stance on the view put forward by Crowder and Gerald Morgan that sexual relationships are okay while still married to a spouse, as long as the divorce proceedings have begun?" End quote. Pastor Roy Williamson responded, quote, "Since you are no doubt familiar with the political acronym RHINO, suffice it to say that apart from contributions, and this is in bold, Mr. Morgan's membership relationship with this church qualifies him as a MINO," end quote, end bold, apparently an acronym for, quote, "member in name only," end quote. In Pastor Williamson's elusive response, which he asked to be published in full, linked below, he went on at length but refused to pass judgment on Morgan's definition of adultery, instead claiming my inquiry was simply a matter of personal grievance. Strangely enough, in other emails regarding the church's stance on extramarital dating, Pastor Williamson was much more between the eyes. In an August 27th email responding to the question, quote, "Is it okay for spouses who are getting a divorce to date other people while they are still legally married?" End quote. Williamson wrote, quote, "Any church or group that says that it is okay to date or to have intimate relations outside the marriage by still married spouses is wrong." Wrong is in all caps. End quote. Elsewhere resorting to all caps, quote, "Let me see if I can make this clear." Begin caps. "It is wrong, unfaithful, a clear indication that the cheating spouse is not obedient to Jesus' instruction." End caps, end quote. I'll leave it to the reader to deduce why Williamson's response was so clear when dealing with those who hypothetically endorse extramarital dating, but so slippery when confronted with an actual endorsement by a church member who happens to be a wealthy CEO. Gerald Morgan's reputation for piety isn't just stretched by Stephen Crowder, however. Morgan has recently hired new talent accused of sexual misconduct and assault, while simultaneously forcing staff to sign NDA contracts with $100,000 penalties. Linked. When Brian Callen, Brian is spelled B-R-Y-A-N and Callen is spelled C-A-L-L-E-N, joined the new Mug Club network on Rumble, Crowder introduced his co-host as someone who had been canceled by the left, and Callen lamented how in today's world you'll, quote, "be punished if you stand with traditional beliefs and values," end quote. Of course, Callen wasn't canceled for espousing traditional values, but rather for accusations of sexual misconduct, including rape. Although Callen denied the more serious accusations, linked here in the article, he's elsewhere admitted he likely exposed himself to women on occasion. Side note, I wonder if he also has red hair. Continue reading. As reported by the LA Times, Callen joked about how he'd been sexually harassing comedian Whitney Cummings. Last name is spelled C-U-M-M-I-N-G-S. For years. In response, Cummings recounted how Callen asked for a ride after a comedy show and then pulled out his penis in her car. Linked here in the article. Callen said he didn't recall the episode but believed her version of events. He further described Cummings as a good friend who had, quote, ranted ad nauseum about showing her my penis on my podcast, which is no secret to anyone at this point anywhere. End quote. Side note, thank you for admitting all of this, Callan. Continue reading. Gerald Morgan also recently hired Michael Spadone. Question, is it Spadone or Spadoni? Last name is spelled Spadone, and Michael is regular spelling, as the head of Louder with Crowder's new undercover unit. Spadone left Project Veritas after being accused of sexually assaulting a colleague in a since-settled lawsuit. The lawsuit, linked here, contains the following account. Spadone's flirtation became sexual assault on December 17, 2021, at the Project Veritas Christmas party. At around 10 p.m., Spadone, who appeared to be highly intoxicated and high on marijuana, and who was very sweaty, came from out of nowhere onto the dance floor and forced himself on plaintiff. This part is in bold. He put his hands around her waist, began bear hugging her, kissing her neck, loudly shouted into her ear that she was, quote, so fucking hot, end quote, and worked his way up to her lips while she resisted, end bold. It took two men, parentheses, Angelo Martinez and Jake Mantell, end parentheses, to pull Spadone off of plaintiff. Martinez screamed, quote, yo, get off of her, man, end quote. Journalist Robert Haar, aka, quote, Lithium, end quote, who reports directly to Spadone, came up to Zapier at the holiday party later and said, quote, I can't believe Jitsu, Spadone's undercover name, that is in parentheses, was all over you, end quote. Plaintiff immediately described the incident to former editor Nick Goya. I'm going to pronounce that last name as Goya. It's spelled Gioia. So that's my best guess as to how to pronounce that. Parentheses, he was seated at a table at the party, end parentheses, and told him what had happened. Nick expressed shock and said, quote, WTF, end quote. End section. The lawsuit goes on to allege that though the woman in question had recently been promoted, she was promptly fired when she rejected Spadone's invitation to come to his house for a sexual liaison. Amid this rising tide of sexual impropriety allegations, Gerald Morgan strives to keep afloat as Louder with Crowder's resident theologian and saint. The only question is how far he's willing to go in giving his rubber stamp of Christian conservative approval to anything Steven Crowder does. Between Callan, who's known to expose himself to the ladies, Crowder, who allegedly prefers the gentlemen, and Spadone, who's more into groping, Louder with Crowder employees may face a rough time at this year's company Christmas party. But don't worry, they've all signed $100,000 penalty NDAs saying they won't talk, and Gerald Morgan will be there to reassure them that whatever happens, no matter how sexual or vulgar, is biblically appropriate and completely in line with so-called, quote, Christian conservatism, end quote. All right, that's the end of the article. I wonder, do they really think that we need a repeat of Harvey Weinstein / Mars Hill / Southern Baptist Convention style sexual assault, sexual harassment, and we just need more of this? Or are they so impressed by what those people and organizations did that they're like, oh, well, we just need our own Louder with Crowder stamped brand of this? I wouldn't be surprised if we get like 3 official documentaries out of this and several unofficial YouTube documentaries. And personally, I much appreciate the YouTube documentaries over most of the official ones, as those tend to be better representative, not just of the subjects, but also the people involved in the allegations. And they seem to do a better job of actually using detective skills in determining who is being truthful and honest. I did want to have an end, well, not really clip, but an end feature, shall we call it, of Chuck Swindoll, the megachurch official head pastor of the megachurch that Gerald Morgan attends. According to the Wikipedia page, Charles Roselle Swindoll, also known as Chuck Swindoll, he was born October 18th, 1934. He's an evangelical Christian pastor, author, educator, and radio preacher. He founded Insight for Living, headquartered in Frisco, Texas, which airs a radio program of the same name on more than 2,000 stations around the world in 15 languages. He is currently senior pastor at Stonebriar Community Church in Frisco, Texas. Yeah, inspirational Christian living. Looks about right. Let's go down to selected publications. What is he most known for writing? Besides assuming that it's boring, let's read a couple of these titles. Hand Me Another Brick, written in 1978. You and Your Child, written in 1977. 3 Steps Forward, 2 Steps Back, Persevering Through Pressure, written in 1980. Strike the Original Match, written in 1980. Improving Your Serve, The Art of Unselfish Living, written in 1981. Strengthening Your Grip, Essentials in an Aimless World, written in 1982. Let's continue down, continue down, continue down, continue down. I'm not going to read all of these just because he has written so much of it, and I'm sure so much of it he's forgotten because he's a pastor of a megachurch. And as we all know, it's not like megachurches have ever been the sources of scandal before. Definitely not. I'm sure everything at Stonebriar Church is running exactly how a Christian organization should. Apparently he wrote a study Bible. Apparently he has some New Testament insights on commentary. Profiles and Character series. Yeah, it figures. As of now, normal megachurch pastor with his normal pastoral writings and with his normal, enormous pastoral career. He's probably better at pontificating about the Bible than actually understanding the Bible. But that wouldn't surprise me. I do hope that he and his church are genuinely doing well and that Gerald Morgan is just an isolated case. But I highly doubt it. And I'm interested in seeing and hearing the stories coming out of that church. If you or anyone you know attends Stonebriar Community Church down in Frisco, Texas, I would be interested in hearing your stories. Please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, leaving a comment down below, and of course reaching out directly to me at foreverswinging89@protonmail.com. Thank you for watching.